The aircraft cut through the desert night like a blade, its lights piercing the darkness as it descended toward Riyadh. Below, the city glowed with a quiet, confidence, golden, highways threading through vast stretches of sand, towers rising like monuments to ambition and power. Inside the cabin, Keanu Reeves sat alone, composed, his expression unreadable. To the outside world, he was a celebrated American actor attending a private cultural event. To forces unseen, his arrival meant something far more dangerous. The jet touched down smoothly. The door opened, and warm desert air rushed inside, carrying the faint scent of sand and fuel. Keanu stepped onto the tarmac in a tailored black suit, calm and unhurried. Camera flashes were absent. No fans waited. This arrival was deliberately quiet, arranged to avoid attention. A luxury convoy stood ready, engines humming softly, drivers motionless behind tinted glass. What Keanu did not see were the eyes already on him. From a control room overlooking the runway, Saudi intelligence officers monitored live feeds. Facial recognition data scrolled across screens. His name pulsed red on a classified list, flagged not by Saudi authorities, but through an encrypted international alert, quietly shared hours earlier. The source was American. The implication was explosive. As Keanu entered the waiting vehicle, the convoy rolled out under heavy but discreet security. The city welcomed him with polished streets and towering architecture. Yet beneath the surface, invisible lines were tightening. Every checkpoint they passed logged his movement. Every minute was recorded. This was not protection. It was containment. Inside the car, Keanu gazed out at Riyadh's illuminated skyline. He had been here before, in other cities like this, places where power and secrecy coexisted. A familiar unease settled in his chest. He couldn't explain it, but something felt wrong. Invitations had come too quickly. Arrangements had been too precise. And the silence, no interviews, no publicity, was unsettling. At a high-security hotel, staff greeted him with practiced smiles. The suite was flawless. Marble floors, panoramic views, luxury so refined it felt unreal. Yet as the door closed behind him, the silence grew heavier. Somewhere deep in the building, systems activated. Cameras adjusted. Signals were sent. Across the city, in a restricted intelligence archive, an old digital file was being accessed for the first time in years. Layers of clearance peeled away. Dates, locations, redacted missions. One name sat at the center, buried under classifications and political compromise. Keanu Reeves. He stood by the window, watching the city lights shimmer in the distance, unaware that his arrival had triggered a chain of events stretching far beyond Saudi borders. In Washington, alerts had already reached the highest levels. In New York, preparations quietly began. Jurisdiction lines blurred. Authority shifted. This was no longer a visit. The clock on the hotel wall glowed softly. 12:47 a.m. The city outside had quieted, the distant hum of traffic fading into a low, constant murmur. Keanu Reeves sat alone in the dim light of the suite, jacket draped over a chair, sleeves rolled back as if he were waiting for something he couldn't name. The unease he'd felt since landing had not faded. It had sharpened. A faint knock broke the silence. Not the casual knock of hotel staff. This was measured, controlled, official. Keanu stood slowly, every instinct alert. He opened the door to find 3 men in dark attire standing in the hallway. No weapons were visible, but their posture said enough. Behind them, the corridor was empty, sealed, silent, guarded. "Mr. Reeves," the lead officer said calmly, his voice respectful but firm. "We need you to come with us for questioning." "For what reason?" Keanu asked, his tone steady. The man hesitated, for half a second, long enough to confirm what Keanu already suspected. "That information will be provided shortly, sir." Keanu nodded. Years of experience had taught him when resistance was pointless. He reached for his jacket, then paused. "Am I under arrest?" The officer met his eyes. "You are being detained under Saudi authority. This is a procedural matter. Procedural." The word echoed hollowly. The elevator ride down felt endless. No one spoke. Cameras followed every second, red indicators blinking softly. At the service level, armored vehicles waited, not police cars, but something more controlled, more serious. Keanu was guided inside one, the door closing with a heavy final sound. As the convoy moved through the sleeping city, encrypted calls were already crossing borders. The detention had been approved minutes earlier. Not by a judge, not by a public court, but through channels that existed only for moments like this, when politics, intelligence, and law collided. They arrived at a secure government facility hidden behind unmarked walls. Inside, the atmosphere was calm, almost sterile. Keanu was escorted into a private room. No bars, no chains, just a table, 2 chairs, and a camera mounted in the corner. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Finally, a senior official entered, placing a tablet on the table. On the screen, dates, locations, redacted paragraphs, and a single line unblurred. United States, federal interest active. This detention, the official said carefully, did not originate here. Keanu's jaw tightened. Then why am I here? Because, the man replied, you crossed into our jurisdiction while flagged by another. The implication was clear. Saudi Arabia was not the destination. It was the doorway. Keanu leaned back, absorbing the reality settling in around him. This wasn't about a crime committed tonight or even recently. This was about something buried, something long ignored, something powerful enough to awaken international protocols. As the official stood to leave, he added one final sentence. Quiet, deliberate. The facility was quiet in the way only classified places could be. No footsteps. No raised voices, just the soft hum of servers and climate control, systems protecting, secrets worth more than lives. Beneath layers of reinforced concrete, a secure archive room came alive for the first time in years. A senior intelligence analyst stared at the screen in front of him as access codes unlocked one layer after another. Red warnings flashed briefly, then disappeared. The file had not been opened since a different era when global alliances were less fragile and certain operations were never meant to surface again. The name at the center of the file was unmistakable. Reeves, Keanu Charles. Status, dormant, reactivated. The analyst leaned back slowly. This was not a criminal profile. There were no fingerprints, no mugshots, no history of conventional charges. Instead, the file was dense with mission timestamps, foreign locations, and entire sections blacked out by digital redaction. The few readable lines told a far more troubling story, one involving unofficial cooperation, deniable actions, and political decisions made in shadow rooms. Years earlier, during a period of escalating international instability, a private humanitarian mission had been launched under unofficial American oversight. Publicly, it never existed. Unofficially, it crossed borders it shouldn't have, interfered with matters it didn't fully understand, and left behind consequences powerful people later worked desperately to erase. Keanu Reeves's name appeared not as an operative, but as a witness who knew too much. As the analyst scrolled deeper, a secure notification appeared on his console. U.S. federal interest confirmed. FBI jurisdiction pending. The message was clear. Washington had finally decided the silence was no longer safe. Across the city, in another secured room, Saudi intelligence leadership reviewed the same information. The decision forming between them was delicate. This was not about protecting Keanu Reeves, nor was it about punishing him. It was about managing fallout. Once the Americans reclaimed him, whatever storm followed would no longer be Saudi Arabia's responsibility. Meanwhile, unaware of the storm intensifying around him, Keanu sat alone in his holding room. The calm he projected outward masked a storm of memory, faces, voices, a promise he had once made to stay silent, to walk away, to let history bury itself. He had believed that promise was mutual. It wasn't. At exactly 03:12 a.m., a secure transmission was sent from Riyadh to Washington. It contained only 3 lines. Subject located. Status detained. Transfer authorization requested. In response, the gears of American federal power began to turn. Not loudly, not publicly. Flights were scheduled under diplomatic cover. Agents were pulled from assignments and rerouted without explanation. Sealed warrant, unsigned for years, was removed from a vault and placed on a desk. Back in the archive. The desert horizon began to pale as dawn approached, the sky shifting from black to deep indigo. On a restricted Saudi military airstrip far from civilian terminals, a lone aircraft descended without markings, its arrival absent from any public flight log. As the wheels touched the runway, a quiet but decisive new phase of the operation began. The ramp lowered. 6 figures stepped onto the tarmac in tailored dark suits, movements precise, expressions unreadable. These were not ordinary federal agents. Each carried diplomatic clearance, sealed orders, and authority that bypassed most conventional channels. The letters FBI were never spoken aloud, but they were understood by everyone present. A Saudi liaison officer approached, exchanging formal greetings. There were no smiles. This was business conducted between governments, not men. Inside a secured hangar, the Americans were briefed quickly. No small talk. No questions answered beyond necessity. The subject is stable, the liaison said. Cooperative. Detained without incident. One of the FBI agents, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice, honed by years of command, nodded. We'll take it from here. Inside a mobile command unit, digital screens flickered to life. Satellite images, biometric confirmations, and legal documents filled the displays. At the center was a federal warrant, classified, unsigned by any judge in open court, activated only under extraordinary circumstances. It bore an old date and a fresh authorization stamp. This wasn't an arrest meant for headlines. It was retrieval. As the FBI team reviewed the file, the weight of it settled in. The name attached to the warrant was famous worldwide, but the man described inside the documents barely resembled the public figure. He was listed as a material witness under sealed indictment, tied to a covert operation whose exposure could destabilize multiple governments. He doesn't know the full scope, one agent said quietly. No, the team leader replied, and he never was supposed to. Across the facility, Keanu Reeves was informed that American authorities had arrived. The news landed with a strange calm. Part of him had expected this moment since the first knock on his hotel door. Another part had hoped, naively, that the past had truly been laid to rest. He was escorted through secured corridors to a neutral meeting room. When the FBI agents entered, the atmosphere changed instantly. Their presence carried a familiarity that Saudi authority hadn't. Language, posture, silence shaped by the same culture. Mr. Reeves, the team leader said, meeting his eyes. We're here under U.S. federal authority. So it finally came to this, Keanu replied quietly. We'll explain what we can, she said. But first, you're coming with us. Outside the room, legal advisors finalized documents. Signatures exchanged between nations under diplomatic protocol. Saudi Arabia's role was ending. The responsibility and the consequences were now entirely American. The hangar door slid shut with a low metallic echo, sealing the world outside. Inside, the air was cool, controlled, and heavy with unspoken consequence. 2 flags stood at opposite ends of the vast space. Saudi Arabia on one side, the United States on the other, symbols of sovereignty, silently witnessing what was about to occur. Keanu Reeves stood between 2 realities. He was positioned beneath harsh overhead lights, his hands relaxed at his sides, posture calm despite the gravity of the moment. Around him, Saudi security officers maintained a respectful distance, while the FBI team formed a quiet perimeter. No weapons were raised, no voices were elevated. This was not a scene of force, it was a ceremony of power. A Saudi legal official stepped forward, holding a secure tablet. The document displayed on the screen was brief but absolute. A formal release of jurisdiction. The official read aloud the final authorization, his voice steady, neutral. By mutual agreement and under diplomatic protocol, custody of the subject is hereby transferred to the United States federal authorities. The words landed with finality. The FBI team leader stepped forward next, presenting sealed credentials and the federal warrant. The 2 officials exchanged signatures, digital, encrypted, irreversible. For a brief moment, both governments were bound by the same line of code, the same decision, the same risk. Then it was done. A subtle shift followed, almost imperceptible yet profound. Saudi officers stepped back. The FBI agents stepped in. One of them gently guided Keanu's wrists forward. The restraints were applied smoothly, professionally, not as punishment but as procedure. The soft click of the cuffs echoed louder than it should have in the cavernous hangar. Keanu exhaled slowly. "So this is it," he said, not accusing, not afraid. "For now," the agent replied quietly. "You'll have legal representation once we land." Keanu nodded. He wasn't surprised. He had lived long enough to recognize when the road ahead narrowed to a single direction. As he was escorted toward the waiting aircraft, he glanced once over his shoulder. Saudi officials stood watching, not with hostility, but with something closer to relief. Whatever storm followed would no longer break on their shores. At the base of the aircraft stairs, the desert wind stirred, lifting fine sand into the air. The rising sun painted the sky in streaks of gold and crimson, indifferent to the moment unfolding below. History rarely announced itself with drama. It preferred quiet exchanges and sealed doors. Inside the aircraft, the environment was stark and functional. No luxury, no windows wide enough to admire the view. Keanu was seated and secured, flanked by agents on either side. Across from him, another agent reviewed documents. Eyes flicking up occasionally, curiosity restrained by discipline. As the engines powered up, a final confirmation came through the headsets. Transfer complete. Airspace cleared. The aircraft climbed steadily, leaving the desert behind as clouds swallowed the horizon. Inside, the cabin was dim, illuminated by soft instrument lights and the occasional glow of digital screens. The steady vibration of the engines created a constant, hypnotic hum, an inescapable reminder that everything was now in motion. Keanu Reeves sat restrained in his seat, posture straight, eyes fixed on the small oval window beside him. Beyond it, the sky stretched endlessly, indifferent and vast. Somewhere below lay borders, oceans, and invisible lines of law and power he was now crossing without consent. He had crossed many borders in his life, but never like this. An FBI agent seated across from him studied a tablet, scrolling through files. Keanu wasn't meant to see names, locations, redactions, layered upon redactions. The past reorganized into evidence. "You holding up?" the agent asked quietly, not unkindly. Keanu glanced over, then nodded. "I've had worse flights." The agent allowed a faint, restrained smile before returning to his screen. Humor, even minimal, felt dangerous here. As hours passed, the cabin settled into a tense routine. Agents rotated watch, whispered updates into headsets, and double-checked restraints not out of fear, but obligation. Keanu remained calm, though his thoughts were anything but. Memories surfaced uninvited. A conversation years ago in a dim room. A promise of protection. An assurance that his cooperation, his silence, would be enough. He had never signed anything. Never testified. He had simply walked away when told it was over. Now he understood the truth. It was never over. It was postponed. Midway through the flight, turbulence rattled the cabin lightly. The aircraft shuddered, trays vibrating, lights flickering for a fraction of a second before stabilizing. The sound alone was enough to raise alertness among the escort team. One agent glanced toward the cockpit. Another checked communications. "Routine," came the calm voice over the intercom. Still, tension lingered. Keanu closed his eyes briefly, grounding himself in slow, measured breaths. Fear wasn't what troubled him most. It was uncertainty. He didn't know what the Americans wanted anymore. Was he a witness? A liability? Or a convenient shield to absorb blame meant for others who would never sit in a cell? An agent leaned closer. "Once we land, you'll be transferred to federal holding in New York. Questions will come later." "Public?" Keanu asked. "No," the agent replied. "Not yet." That answer unsettled him more than any threat could have. Somewhere over the Atlantic, as the plane cut through endless darkness, a secure message arrived in the cockpit. Its contents were brief, but the reaction was immediate. The captain acknowledged it without comment. Inside the cabin, the team leader stiffened, then masked it with practiced composure. "Keanu. Noticed? Problem?" he asked. The agent met his gaze for a long moment. "Let's just say, you're more important than you realized." The aircraft had been cruising steadily for hours. The rhythm of the engines a constant hum that masked the tension inside. Keanu Reeves sat upright, hands lightly resting on the restraints, eyes scanning the cabin. Outside, a blanket of dark clouds stretched endlessly. But inside, a different storm was brewing, one far less predictable. Without warning, the plane jolted sharply, tossing trays and papers. The hum of the engines shifted into a low, unsettling vibration. Red warning lights flashed on the overhead panels. A low, mechanical warning tone echoed through the cabin. The agents immediately tensed, hands moving instinctively toward communication devices and restraints. "Report!" One agent barked into his headset, voice calm but urgent. The response from the cockpit was clipped. "Minor turbulence. Unexpected system anomalies. Stand by." Keanu felt a ripple of unease. He had flown countless times under extreme conditions, but the combination of mechanical anomalies and the presence of federal agents made this different. Every eye in the cabin was trained on him, yet none of them seemed able to offer reassurance. One agent approached him cautiously. "Stay calm, Mr. Reeves. We've got it under control." Keanu's gaze shifted to the narrow window beside him. Lightning flashed silently within the clouds, illuminating the interior of the plane in stark, ghostly bursts. It wasn't just turbulence. Something about the timing felt deliberate, calculated. The senior FBI agent moved quickly to a panel, typing commands, eyes darting between screens. "Something's interfering with the navigation system," she muttered, voice barely audible. "Could be a technical fault, or someone trying to stop this flight." The words hung in the cabin like smoke. Agents exchanged glances, tension mounting. Keanu remained calm outwardly, but his mind raced. If sabotage was involved, then the situation had escalated beyond custody. It was now survival. The plane shuddered again, this time more violently. Agents instinctively secured themselves and tightened Keanu's restraints. The hum of the engines warped into an anxious vibration, and for a brief moment, all thought of diplomacy, warrants, and protocol disappeared. All that remained was the fragile balance between control and chaos at 40,000 feet. Keanu leaned back, eyes narrowing. He knew how to read people and situations under pressure. Something about the timing of the turbulence, the subtle way the lights flickered, and the agent's reaction suggested this wasn't random. Someone wanted to delay them, or worse. Minutes passed. Systems gradually stabilized, warning lights extinguishing as the crew regained control. The agents exhaled collectively, tension slowly draining from their muscles, though their vigilance remained unbroken. Keanu sat forward, voice low but steady. "So, this is how they greet me." The agent beside him didn't answer immediately, instead focusing on monitoring the systems. Finally, she gave a thin smile. The aircraft descended through a thick layer of clouds, the lights of New York glimmering below like a grid of a city that never truly slept. But tonight, the city's usual rhythm was paused in a corridor of secrecy. On a discreet runway at a federal airfield, a lockdown had already been enacted. Black SUVs, armed federal agents, and specialized vehicles formed a cordon around the landing strip, flashing lights cutting through the early morning haze. Inside the plane, Keanu Reeves felt the vibration change as the landing gear extended. Every muscle in the agents escorting him tensed. For the first time since leaving Riyadh, he caught the full weight of the operation. This was no ordinary transfer. It was a full-scale, highly coordinated interception designed to ensure that no outside variable could interfere. The aircraft touched down with clinical precision, tires screeching softly against the tarmac. As it slowed, agents on board readied themselves. A door at the front of the cabin opened, revealing the stark fluorescent glow of the secured ramp. "Ready?" the lead FBI agent asked, her voice a calm anchor in the storm of adrenaline. Keanu nodded. He had been prepared mentally for months for this, yet nothing could truly prepare a man for the orchestration of power he was witnessing now. The plane doors opened fully, and he was guided down the ramp. Cameras and journalists were absent, but security cameras, drones, and infrared sensors watched every step. Outside, the federal cordon was meticulous. Agents in tactical gear flanking the path, vehicles positioned for rapid interception or obstruction, a chain of command visible in the rigid discipline of movement. As he was escorted toward a sleek black SUV, Keanu caught sight of the city skyline. The world beyond the lockdown carried on obliviously, unaware that one man was crossing invisible lines of law, diplomacy, and justice with every step. The SUV doors opened, and he was guided inside. The interior was stark but efficient. Agents seated across from him, their eyes never leaving the road or the secure perimeter outside. The vehicle moved slowly through the cordon, tires crunching on gravel, lights flashing intermittently, as other federal vehicles formed a moving shield around them. Inside, Keanu finally allowed himself a breath, though the tension remained coiled. His mind raced with questions about the charges he would face, about the secrets he carried, about who would benefit from his silence or his truth. The airport's lockdown had been enacted not just to control the scene. It was to control the narrative, to manage the variables before anyone could interfere with the inevitable. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Outside, the city's sounds were muffled behind the barriers and secure perimeters. Inside, the hum of the SUV and the faint hiss of air conditioning became the rhythm of containment A's. The vehicle approached. The facility where he would be held. Keanu realized the stark truth. The doors of the high-security federal facility closed behind Keanu Reeves with a sound that resonated like finality. The echoes of the corridor swallowed him as he was, escorted past multiple layers of reinforced steel and biometric checkpoints. Every step reinforced the reality. This was no public court. No media spectacle, no celebrity fanfare. This was confinement, purpose-built to contain information, influence, and the unpredictable will of a man who had crossed invisible lines. Inside the cell, the air was cool and sterile, the faint scent of disinfectant hanging in the background. Concrete walls stretched high, unbroken by decoration, windows, or any illusion of comfort. A single overhead light cast sharp shadows across the room, emphasizing the starkness of isolation. A narrow metal bench and table were all that awaited him. Functional, uninviting, and deliberately minimal. Keanu sat, placing his hands on the cold metal surface, his gaze fixed forward. Silence surrounded him, punctuated only by the distant hum of ventilation and the soft footsteps of the agents who monitored from just outside the reinforced door. No one spoke. Every movement was calculated, measured, and observed. Minutes passed. Hours could have passed. Time was irrelevant here. Then a federal investigator entered, briefcase in hand, her expression a mixture of professionalism and calculated caution. She placed documents on the table, opened them, and allowed the overhead light to illuminate the contents for him. "Mr. Reeves," she began, her voice calm yet sharp, "you are here because of information only you possess. The situation is delicate, and your cooperation is necessary. You are not charged with a public crime, but your knowledge makes you critical to ongoing investigations." Keanu studied the documents, recognizing fragments of missions and events he had long tried to bury in memory. Faces, places, operations, some humanitarian, some clandestine, revealed consequences he had never fully considered. "Why now?" he asked quietly. "Why bring me here?" The investigator met his gaze. "Because the past is catching up. What was once controlled has now resurfaced. Governments change, priorities shift, and secrecy has limits. You know more than most, and the wrong people already know you exist." Keanu leaned back, absorbing the weight of her words. He had spent years navigating public perception, controlling narratives in films, interviews, and appearances. But here, in a concrete cell, that control was stripped entirely. Every decision, every movement, every breath was now observed, measured, and accounted for. A small monitor inside the cell flickered, displaying real-time feeds from multiple intelligence sources indicating that his presence was now under constant digital surveillance. Every external contact, every potential intrusion, every signal was recorded. The world outside might continue to function normally, but inside Keanu realized reality had shifted entirely. As he sat there, the interrogation room was stark, oppressive, yet meticulously clean. Fluorescent lights glared down from above, casting sharp lines across the reinforced glass walls. Keanu Reeves sat alone at a steel table, his hands clasped lightly, his posture calm but alert. On the other side of the glass, shadows shifted, federal investigators, lawyers, and agents observing every expression, every micro-movement, every heartbeat amplified by the silence. A single chair scraped against the floor as an agent entered the room. Placing a digital file on the table, the screen flickered to life, displaying fragments of classified operations, intelligence reports, and evidence tied directly to Keanu's past actions. The details were enough to implicate powerful figures, reveal sensitive missions, and expose secrets long buried by governments on both sides of the Atlantic. "You know why you're here," the agent said, voice even, controlled. "We need the truth, and we need it now. Everything you've experienced, everything you've seen, it all matters. What you say and what you withhold will shape decisions at the highest levels." Keanu leaned back, eyes scanning the illuminated data, his mind racing. He had always walked the line between visibility and discretion, between fame and personal choice. But this was a line drawn by forces far beyond him, and crossing it meant more than public scandal. It meant global consequence. He realized the choice before him was stark. Speak and risk lives, power structures and alliances, or remain silent and survive, while knowing that silence came with its own dangers. Every piece of information he withheld was a shield. Every truth revealed a weapon. The agent's gaze was unwavering. "We understand the stakes, but silence isn't an option anymore. You're not just a witness, you're the key." Keanu's fingers drummed lightly on the table. Memories flashed, meetings in shadowed rooms, coded messages, whispered promises, risks taken for the greater good, and mistakes he had carried silently for years. He had believed those moments were safely hidden, buried under layers of diplomacy and secrecy. But nothing remains hidden forever. A lawyer stepped forward, reminding him of rights, legal protections, and the weight of international law. Keanu listened, acknowledging them with a subtle nod. Yet even with legalities outlined, the room's atmosphere was suffocating. The real law, the one that mattered tonight, was measured not in statutes but in choices and consequences. He leaned forward, eyes meeting the agent's. "Through the reinforced glass, you want the truth," he said quietly. "Be ready for what comes with it, because once I start, nothing will be the same." A moment of silence followed, the weight of his words pressing down on the observers outside. The room, the world remained unaware. Inside, history held its breath. Keanu Reeves, the man who had lived in the limelight yet remained a private enigma, was now confronted with a truth far larger than fame or fortune.